right. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to this LinkedIn Live. I'm John Lieberman with Demandbase. So happy to have Scott Stratten there to my left on the screen. You probably know Scott, and if you don't, you will after this brief encounter, and you'll probably want more of him because we were just chatting off camera for a bit, and we probably could have went on for hours and hours, but Scott's the co-author of I think a half dozen best-selling books. He's the co-host of the UnPodcast, which has more than 1 million downloads. He's got viral videos, et cetera, et cetera. I won't read you his whole resume, but Scott, thanks so much for taking a little bit of time.
And thank you for not reading out the bio. That's you've saved us all some long drawn out pain. So yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate you, John.
Well, Scott, before we get to the meat of why marketing's all screwed up and what we can do to fix it, or how you can help us fix it. First of all, I know you're a huge sports fan. So will the Detroit Lions get to the Super Bowl this season?
Oh my goodness. That is such an extreme question that my brain didn't know how to process it just there, because that is a question I literally, John, have never been asked in my life. It is, will the Lions win a game is usually what it is, considering I was at one of the 0-16 season games, full on face paint and blue faux hawk going. And it's not, we're in a rebuild. I know it sounds, but I've been saying this for 30 years. But,
Welcome to my world. Yeah, I'm an Orioles fan. We've been in a rebuild too.
But you know what? The difference I have right now is not that I'm in a constantly rebuild, or that we've wasted multiple Hall of Famers career, Barry, Calvin, and then thank you, Matthew. At least he didn't retire early because of how much the Lions hate. This is the first time I've actually have confidence in the leadership in doing something. So, which is also can be a thing for business and everything else. But yeah, I have faith a bit, and I haven't had faith in a very long time. I just had to take pockets. So for me, it's always been my Super Bowl is making the playoffs. And I think in 3 years.
All right, great. We're going to hold you to that. We'll revisit this in a few years and we'll come back and ask. But, and I want to urge everybody, if you have questions for Scott or for me, put them in the chat. We'll get to your questions. We're going to just have a real open and honest discussion, transparent discussion about the state of marketing and sales and what companies are doing well, what they're not doing well. We think we're out of COVID. All of a sudden we're not. We're sort of back into COVID and virtual events. What does all of that mean? And hopefully you, the audience, leave with some good actionable insight that you can take to your day-to-day. So, Scott, let me ask you this first. And I know that you could probably go on for hours about this, but what is it that marketers are doing completely wrong as we sit here today?
One of the biggest, I was just thinking about this before coming on and connecting with you, was that although it's most humans, I think that we think we're special. And I don't mean that by just, that we have to be coddled or anything, but we think that our situations, our circumstances, our campaigns, or our company are unique and special. And they are. Fine. They are unique in certain ways, but you're not unique in human nature. You're not unique in what drives awareness, what drives purchase intent, what drives those things. It's the same. And one of the biggest disservices I've seen over the past, 20 years, I'll go 20 years, is that we don't learn a lot of times from marketing outside of our industries. It kills me, John, that like my whole life has been like the past 10 years, I've been living my dream since I've been 12, which is just doing keynote talks at conferences. I wanted to do it since I saw Les Brown on a WNED Buffalo feed across Lake Ontario. And I wanted to do it. And I love it. And every single time, almost it's a rounding error how when it doesn't happen, every event says, Scott, we loved you at this event. We want to bring you to our event, but our audience is different every time. And I just asked them, are they human? If they're horses, I have to come up with something else. But if they're human, our mistake is thinking our targets, our clients, are exceptions to the rule, are unique. And again, you're unique. I get fine. But they're not in a lot of the basic rules, right? In marketing, we just want to understand that we don't want to overpromise. We don't want to over sugarcoat certain things. We want to be able to say, this is what we do. And then once it goes in past that part of the funnel, we can do it. That's the end of the story. And nothing you're going to do. Oh, also, by the way, you can't make viral. That's my other thing. You
Oh
can't.
yeah,
No,
totally agree.
I used to have a viral video company, and they're like, "Here's a video. Can you make it viral?" I'm like, "If you bring it to me, I cannot. If we create it, we can try." And that's again the same thing. It's just, and I can't. It was great for my bank account, but one of the reasons I got out of consulting was that people would pay me a stupid amount of money to tell them how I think they should do something and fix their problems, and then they just wouldn't do it, which is fine for me. It's just like having somebody who you don't fix totally. They have to keep coming back to you. But I had to stop doing it. It's a waste of time on both ends, that we think we know our market because we know ourselves, and that's not how it works.
And it comes back to, Scott, the word that I think of when you describe human and all that is the word empathy.
Yeah.
Like, I think for so long we didn't think about our audiences and kind of what they wanted and how they wanted to consume content and all that. We just thought about what we wanted to create, produce, wanted them to read, watch, listen to, right?
We get way too focused on the numbers, John. We get way too. Now, I understand marketing's a numbers game, and thankfully now is such a wonderful time to be alive and be in any sort of marketing when you're looking at conversion data, because we don't have to guess anymore, right? That
Right.
famous saying in the ad industry, with 50% of my advertising works, I just don't know which 50%. And but now you do know. You can target right down to an individual in Nebraska if you want to, and say this person who likes this T-shirt and this, and I just, it's French kiss to me. I love it. It's changed every single marketing aspect to me. But that's an issue, because when you only look at numbers, if something went more viral and something picked up and you're just like, well, let's keep doing whatever that is. Well, the numbers don't show that. The numbers don't show sentiment properly. The numbers don't show that what we're betraying our current customer base to try to get new ones, or we do something that's not as ethical as it could be. Well, integrity is not a renewable resource in business. We don't re-up every quarter with it, and that's the problem. There's a famous flower brand, I won't name them, this isn't a name and shame game, it's on your account, not mine, so I'll behave. But there's a flower company where you order one bouquet of flowers for your mom's birthday, and you'd get emails every single day. And I'm like, I have one mother, I have one, okay, and she deserves flowers every day, I get it, but it's not happening. And I then went to unsubscribe, and I clicked it, and it brought me to a landing page that doesn't say, we're sorry to see you go, or da-da-da-da. It said, are you receiving too many emails? Click here for less frequently. If you know the problem ahead of time, that's the problem. But you know why they do it? It's because every time they send an email blast out, they make money. But that's not the point. If you lose a customer on your email list who was a happy customer after the purchase and they unsubscribe, you are terrible at email marketing, and you shouldn't do it. End of story.
Yeah, because I mean that is kind of a cardinal rule, right, Scott? Like, don't piss off your audience. Like,
it's so basic. It's so basic, but instead it's, oh, you gave us some money, give us more immediately. Give us more now, give us more next week, instead of waiting a week and saying, hey, just so you know, we wanted to see if your mom liked the flowers. Not once. I have an email. I have an email when somebody signs up for my newsletter. This is not even a customer, but you can do this with customers if they sign on. But even a newsletter sign up, I've had the same welcome email for 20 years that I've used. And it says, thank you so much for signing up for the UnMarketing newsletter. We know how crowded an inbox can get, and we really appreciate you giving us a slot in there. May we ask what industry you're in? Because it helps us tailor our content to who we have. And we just find it interesting. Scott and Allison. I just got a reply an hour ago from somebody, and they're in biotech. I got a reply months ago from somebody who does digital for the Football Hall of Fame. It's so cool that I get to see these things. And I've never been asked by a company ever anything like that. And it's just human touch, empathy. I've started conversations with subscribers. I've booked gigs because of starting conversation with subscribers, but that was never the goal. The goal was to get to know them more so we can be better for them.
No, absolutely. And I think for way too much time, we've sort of even segmented B2B and B2C, but really it's B to human, right?
And that's the thing. That's the B2B. And that's the number one thing, John, is that it's a B2B or B2C. And we're like, ooh, we're more B2B. And I'm like, you're I don't want to say the cheesy line, but it is P2P. It's person to person. And yes, if you're an account-based marketing, if you're in that world and you're managing an account somewhere, you do have less accounts potentially than a B2C. And yes, the ticket price could be much higher. be much more involved. How long it takes you to convert somebody can take much long. I get it. But at the end of the day, do they trust you? Do they feel they know you? Do they like you? And do they believe it? And that's really anything B2C or B2B.
So let me ask you this, Scott. You write and talk a lot about that everything has changed, but nothing is different. Can you do a bit of a deeper dive into that for us? What do you mean?
Well, so we actually, one of the reasons we did that. So the original UnMarketing book came out in 2010, and it was really that kind of look. Social media is here. You all need to listen. It was one of those things that like just kind of the smack across the face about that stuff. But as the years went on, and social media became much more of commonplace in both business and in the world, that it was no longer saying, "Hey, it's here." It was now saying, "Okay, hang on a second, relax for 1 second here," which was that all these tools are different, all these things are changed, and we changed the subtitle of UnMarketing, this new edition, to put that as a subtitle, because we had to say you have to focus though. You have to make sure that you're using these things properly. These aren't set it and forget it type of places. This isn't about getting a Twitter account and checking it every month. This isn't about posting something on LinkedIn and 5 other platforms and just doing it automatically or robotically. For us, it was about understanding that you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with communities, and you want to deal with them, then act human. And we came up with that new subtitle before the pandemic. So it's not, yeah, so things are different somewhat. But again, the human nature part doesn't change. No matter what tech, no matter what app, no matter what's happening out there, it's still this great product, great service. And if you can provide both of those things in something, you'll be set to be doing very well in business.
So Scott, particularly during the pandemic, because we've been, married to our computer screens and our phone, and there's less barrier to entry to create any kind of content, really, because we don't have to say hire you to come to a physical event and then fly people there, etc. We can just do this. So it's a really noisy place out there with so much content. So, and everybody uses the buzzword storytelling. I mean, it's just sort of something they just tack on. So I'm curious to get your view, A, on what storytelling means to you, and then B, in a noisy environment like the current one, how do you break through the noise?
That is a fantastic question. Because one of my biggest kind of peeves and reliefs right now is that I am not in marketing, meaning I'm not working for somebody, I'm not consulting, I'm not on a team, I don't have an agency, I haven't had one for over a decade, because I don't know if I could do it, John, because it's not just the noise, it's the fact that we come up with a creative. We come up with something that's going to help get our brand noticed or whatever we're looking for, whatever that KPIs we're trying to go for. And when we put it out there at LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, MySpace, Friendster, or I don't care, put it out in all these type of things, and it's dead in 24 hours. Not because the content's bad, but because that's what the algorithm says. And time decay is always a big chunk of any site's algorithm when it comes to social. And it's not, and I don't blame them, by the way. I'm not one of those people. Every time they change it, when Instagram went from relevancy instead of recency in their feed, I argue that vehemently with people, and they're just like, no, it's not what I said. No, you do want relevancy. That's it. Relevancy is marketing. That's the sentence right there. And these sites live or die on how long you spend there, not leaving there, not clicking a link and going off site, which is why they penalize posts and everything else that has external links in them. They want you to stay. And the only reason you stay is because you see something as relevant. That's an adult learning principle. That's not a social media thing or anything else. If you ever say, why am I even looking at this? They've lost. So that's their goal. And relevancy also means recency. And so they keep churning and churning and churning. I've had videos that get a reach of 30 something million on Facebook, and you can just see that curve. It goes viral, and then time decay kicks in and just straight down the ski slope. And if I had to produce that content, I would lose my mind. 24 hours is my best case scenario, pretty much. There are some outliers there. Sure, if you're Chewbacca mask lady or the ocean spray dog face moving, all that, but that's not content by brands. Those are content by consumers.
Yeah.
And you have 24 hours. We have to stop and step back for a second. Your teams that you have, your crew that you've got, you can't come up with gold every single day that you're digging. It's not going to work. You have to space this stuff out. And the entire crowd says more content, keep the algorithm going, of videos daily. I saw a job ad for that. You got to post videos daily on 4 different platforms, which is 4 different videos you have to make and construct. You can do them quickly in other sites and Canva and stuff, and fine. But you're burning out these people. You're burning out your most creative content creators. And the one thing where creativity doesn't work well is under pressure. Mm-hmm. You need to give them some time. You need to give them some space, and you need to let it live. And it needs to live on your own site. It needs to live in your own place, which is why I love what an unintentional plug here with Demandbase TV and stuff, where you keep it there. Because just because content is from a week ago or a month ago, or heaven forbid, 6 months ago, does not mean it's not relevant. And so that's why we changed UnMarketing.com, where it's just like all the articles are there. There's no dates on them at all. What's relevant to you, pick it. And I know they can't do that on social sites, but you sure as heck can do it on your own. And that's where your content should be and live. And it's just too much right now. I couldn't do it, honestly.
So you don't want my job, number one. I learned that. Number two, I think the internet went out a little when you were plugging Demandbase TV. Could you say that again? No, but
I love when they're not on purpose. It's perfect.
No, but you bring up a good point. Let me just remind the audience, if you have any questions for Scott, we have an expert here in all things marketing, storytelling. Please put your questions in the chat. We'll get to them. We have about 10 minutes left. So Scott, if you had kind of a crystal ball, where would you kind of see the future of marketing heading? And specifically, does that future involve a much closer alignment between marketing and sales, in your opinion?
I think it has to be closer. And one of the reasons is some of the marketing assets also have gone away recently. That the tracking that Apple came out with iPhones and iPads and says the stopping apps from tracking, including Facebook, and name a marketer who doesn't have Facebook as one of their epicenters of content analytics and advertising. And then you throw in also the taking away the open rates calculation in a lot of email, and that throws a lot of stuff out the window, but it makes marketers focus differently. And that's what I do like, because open rates, I've always had beef with them anyways. So I was glad to see them go. And it's a way of, how do we want to look at it? Is it going to be more of this sales enablement side of things where we go down? And I just think that a marketing and sales team that isn't sitting next to each other, I mean, literally and figuratively together, and planning and talking at least quarterly, if not monthly, if not being part of a regular weekly type of thing, they need to be hand in hand. I think marketers need to see what salespeople experience. I think salespeople need to see what marketers experience, but also more so, I think sales needs to look at what operations experiences more. Mm-hmm. And whether, I put on my HR hat here and give that kind of job shadowing type of thing, because empathy rules internally as well. And coming from a background, I used to be the national sales training manager for a packaging company. I flew around North America training people how to sell bubble wrap. And I'll say that again. I flew around this continent training people how to sell air. And if you thought what you sell is hard, air. Yeah. I used to run 2-day training schools on this, 16 hours of content. And like, if you think you can BS, I could fill time like nobody's business.
Wow.
But the issue with that was that the sales had known empathy for operations, and operations hated sales, which is the opposite. And look, sales in general as an industry has a right to be looked down upon in a negative way sometimes when it comes to the attitude of sales, which is, we are sales, therefore you only exist because we bring in business. And it's like, it's funny, if we didn't have a product, we wouldn't actually have a business. And you can go down that whole road. I just think empathy in general, and it starts with sales and goes to marketing, goes into operations, goes into customer service, which is understanding that if I get this sale and I know I'm doing something that's going to make them have a headache, but instead of being operations, it's actually Sharon, Mark, and Ken in operations that I now know, then there's some empathy there. And that's the point. The salespeople can't be these lone wolf type of stuff anymore. I know it's great. I know independent people, the road warriors. I live on the road before COVID. I get it. But you've got to have that team empathy and company empathy to understand that the whole thing functions better. Everybody's better, including sales. Because if the operations and service and marketing overpromised, if sales overpromised, the time it comes up to renew something potentially, what do you think is going to come up? And you can't just throw your whole company under the bus. That's not a team. That's rogue.
We have a bunch of questions, Scott. I have one more quick one that I want to ask you, which is, I'm sure you're seeing it and feeling it. There's a lot of fatigue out there. There's audience fatigue is what I call it. They're just, everybody's tired. They want to get back to their real life, their normal lives, whatever normal looks like. We don't know when it's going to happen and all that. How do we reach a fatigued audience?
Partially what you just did now, which you just gave empathy to the audience. You just talked about fatigued audience, and I play off that. Like, one of the best ways I connect with my audience on LinkedIn, I go on LinkedIn Live, I say, hey, and I talk to them, and I talk like this, and I look in the camera and say things like, this is too much, because it is. That this is really hard. And if this hasn't been hard for you in the past 17 months, then look in the mirror and be very thankful for that. And then look away from the mirror and help those who have not had a good time. And those are the connections. And just don't do the standard. And by the way, I never want people to do the standard anyways.
Yeah.
But if I saw one more commercial saying we're in this together, I don't want to be together. I don't want to be part of this. If I get one more email from one of the hundreds of hotels I stayed at saying now we're actually cleaning the rooms, I don't need to see these things. If I rather take this time right now to focus again internal, to take the stories of the people of my company who work for me, who've been making a difference in their community, not in the company. It's always take this time to show and make people and individuals, and that's never too much. That's never exhausted. I'm never exhausted seeing a story of hope, especially now, John. I'm never exhausted seeing a positive story. I'm tired of selfishness and anger and I'm going to make a buck so you can't. I don't want that. I want good stories, and they're there. You just have to find them.
Totally agree. Let's get to some questions. The first one is, for brand community managers, what advice do you have for making content you produce on social be unique and personal to the audience?
It's a hard thing, and it's a semi-loaded question because to make them very personal and unique, it's extremely hard on one platform. And the problem is you're trying to talk to all your followers on all platforms, and that's just not how it works. We all have seen it. Especially people who are like power users on, let's say, TikTok. When a brand gets on there and is just trying to be cool or funny. When you're not cool is when you're trying to be cool. Ask my kids. You just get to this point where it's not, if you want to make it unique, then make it unique. One of my favorite things ever done about that unique was that, if you remember, this is for the OGs watching, this is the Old Spice commercial series, where the guy with buff, not Terry Crews, but the other guy, he's buff and he's the Old Spice. And one of the things they did, I think it was 2010 or 2011, like early on. I'm sounding like I'm talking about the 1800s, but back in the old days.
Yeah.
And that you would send a tweet, and in almost real time, they'd make an Old Spice commercial and say the person's Twitter handle, and it would come on, and then they would share it, and they made dozens that day. Go look up the Old Spice user campaign type of stuff like that. That's what I see as personalized. Other than that, you're not personalizing. You can't make something personal to somebody in a mass way. Now, you can do the empathy like we're talking about. You can do a wonderful, thing to connect with them. But the personal side of it, then you have to be personal. Then you have to share. Then you have to be vulnerable as a brand or as an individual. But a lot of times we don't. Leaders don't want to show it. Brands don't want to show it. This is the time to show it. I think, and honestly, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but personally, as a consumer here, I now want to see what the brands that I choose to buy, how they stand on things.
Yeah.
and their senior executive leadership team, and that will change my decision. Very different, I feel, than 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, it used to be totally off limits.
Totally.
You
And
know,
now
totally.
we always knew where Ben and Jerry stood for the most part. We always knew where
Yeah.
Patagonia might have stood for the most part.
Right.
But it's a lot of the other ones now where it's just like right now it's happening with what companies are making employees get vaccinated, what ones are not, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
We are more interested in that than ever. And and think about the younger generations coming up, like,
Oh my gosh.
It's like you think
our kids' age.
Yeah, you think you and I can be particular for saying, well, I'm not sure, I didn't like what they said about this or something. They have receipts and they're taking names. And I'm just
Absolutely. And speaking of Old Spice, and I don't want to deep dive, but talk about a brand that really evolved to reach the younger audience over the years. I mean, they have done such a terrific job. I mean, Old Spice was like our dads and our grandparents thing. And now it's cool for our kids too to have the Old Spice body wash. Talk about a lesson in brand evolution. But anyway, we can talk about that.
When's Aqua Velva coming back on that level too, man?
Soon.
I'm telling you, it's crazy.
We only have a few minutes. I want to get to Phyllis. Phyllis asked, how do you see podcasting as a podcaster, Scott? How do you see podcasting evolving as a way to make connections with your audience?
First off, hi, Phyllis. It was nice to see your question on there. I've known Phyllis for a long time. One of my OGs online podcasting. So Alison and I did the podcast for 6 years. We put it on hold at the start of the pandemic, and we did about 320 episodes. Came out every week. But we've written 6 books. We've sold over 100,000 copies of the books, and I've just talked on stage. I have never in my life had a more dedicated, loyal, and intimate audience than the podcast audience. They are awesome. They are incredible. We call our audience the 7 because I always joked we only had 7 fans, and they took it and run with it. And here's the thing. Some people would show up at an event I'm speaking at. And this happened 3 times, by the way, separately. They made their own T-shirt that would say one of the 7 or one version of that. And they would come to my conference for their company. It was nothing to do with the podcast. We don't really promote it much outside of just putting out the show. And they come up and say, hey, and they walk up and they just smile. They'd wait for me to notice the shirt. And once I jumped off the stage and ran up to them, and I've never had an audience like that. And you realize that podcasting, it's in your ears. It's very, or in your car or wherever you are. And it's just you and the show. And people go on walk. They take the dogs for a walk. They go to the park, whatever that is, and we go with them. And it's such an intimate space, and we're so proud of that audience, and we treat that we hold them in our hearts so close that we had to stop recording at the start of the pandemic because we would just be mailing it in. And one of the things about UnMarketing and us in general is we never force content. You always want to find the apex between frequency and quality. And our hearts were not in it when the pandemic hit, and they still haven't been 17 months later, because there's bigger and other issues that are not our domain that we want to support and go after and amplify. And our audience, although we just got a message from somebody yesterday asking when it's coming back. We love them and we honor them, which is why we're not doing it right now, because we just don't want to do it for the sake of doing it. And so to answer Phyllis's question in a long-winded way, I think it'll become even more and more so. It's like podcasting has been around for a very long time, much more before Serial, much more before Rogan, much before any of these things. And I just think it's getting more and more popular, and also more and more known in the general zeitgeist of things. And so when we called it the UnPodcast 8 years ago, a lot of people didn't know the word podcast, or either you knew it and you listened, or you didn't and you're not going to try that stuff. And now we're just a show, and the best audiences ever. I think it'll get even stronger.
I love something you just said, Scott, to the effect of, don't just do it so that you can check a box and say you did it.
Worst content mistake ever. Worst one ever.
Yeah. I love that. So real quick, Scott, we're wrapping up. What's the future of UnMarketing? What's next for you all? I know that you're probably super eager to get back out there and keynote in person, but what else is next for you?
Yeah. So I'm in the split. I'm eager to be on stage, but I'm more concerned about the world. And so that's part of me that doesn't push that drive too much. And for us, Allison and I have 5 kids. The youngest 3 are hers, and the oldest 2 are mine. We had a merger years ago, or a hostile takeover, more likely, and
Acquisition.
yeah, an acquisition. Thank you. We had to let a few kids go. We had some redundancies, but we're much more profitable right now. And so, right now, what's for the future for us is enjoying them, because they're all aging out. We have 24 all the way down to 15, and our third is moving out back to school in just over a week from now. And all I want to do, John, is speak on stage when appropriate and when it works, and enjoy their lives and when they invite us, and enjoy being with Allison. And I've lived my dream for a decade, and it was about me. And from 2010 to 2020, I was the social media guy, the star, the most influential one in Canada, until Justin Bieber showed up and all that type of stuff. But like all that stuff and the momentum and the books and the book tours, it's just like, it's been about me. And after the pandemic hit, we had this great stop to everything, and it allowed me to stop and think. It's the first time as a father or a stepfather I've been home for more than a month since being a father. I've been a stepdad for 22 years and a father for 20.
Wow.
And this is the first time I've been home. And you know what, John? I like it. And I've lived my dream, and I'll continue to live my dream going forward. I'm so privileged and so lucky and so fortunate for that. I don't have the endless pursuit of more. I don't want to keep climbing and keep building. I want to do this, and I want to enjoy things, help people, and connect with people I like talking to, like yourself.
Well, Scott, listen, we really appreciate it. I've loved our conversation. I'm hoping that the audience has as well. And one big takeaway is just the idea of empathy, which I just think is, if we can keep that on a Post-it note, on our computer screen, I think it helps us personally, professionally, everywhere, and even as marketers. So, Scott, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Hope we get to chat again. And good luck to your Lions. I mean, my Ravens in Baltimore, look, Lamar Jackson's only gotten COVID twice. We hope he doesn't get it a third time. But if he does...
By the way, shout out to the Ravens. My oldest son is a Ravens fan, so I don't make the kids follow my teams. And we have a Ravens and Steelers and Texans and Lions fans in this house. We did a road trip. Every summer I take a road trip and do some sports. And shout out to the Ravens.
Your oldest son is now my favorite of your 25.
Yeah, he is, by the way. And one of my favorite ballparks is Camden. So it's Comerica and Camden are my 2 favorite ballparks. And
well, hopefully when this is over, we'll catch a game.
Done deal. And I'll bring the Ravens fan with me.
Scott, good to see you. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Take care.